And welcome back, family, to another episode of Metaphysics on Your Mind. I thought in this particular video, what I wanted to talk about, let me just write it up here. Discernment. And, we all know what the word means. The ability to pick out of a situation and understanding and understanding and overstanding of a situation that may have a couple, could have a number of different ways that it can be taken. And discernment is about, that, I don't know if I want to call it an ability or a sense, which I would propose is part of intuition, which we all have. The inner teacher. The trick with intuition is learning how to listen and trust your intuition, because it's not the way that we're brought up or the way that society is set up to necessarily encourage you to use your intuition. A lot of times what we resort to is we try to, we use logic, but where logic isn't necessarily applicable or definitive, that's where we have our intuition. When we're not sure and we're just trying to extract from a situation a meaning, or what is between the lines, what is unspoken that you can perceive, right? And it doesn't have anything to do, it has not much to do with the level of your education. I think it has more to do with your ability to think independently, right? Because that's what discernment is about. It's about being able to think independently and not forming an opinion just based on a consensus of other opinions. Especially if you are vibing something that maybe is in a different direction than maybe where the consensus may be. I was reflecting back on just how ironic my life has been. When I was a kid and even older, I was a horrible student, meaning I would say maybe after 5th or 6th grade, so maybe after the age of 11. Up until then, okay. But after that, just a precipitous disinterest and decline. I mean, I got horrible grades in high school, and went on to college, more bad grades, and eventually became a college dropout. And I mention this because, this is all about learning about things that may be out of the experience that we were born into, or the environment that we were initially cultivated in. And I remember the frustration of just, why? And my father for sure was frustrated because it wasn't that I lacked ability or intellect or aptitude or whatever you want to call it. It was just a complete kind of mystical disengagement from, and the schools that I went to, it was, the traditional approach at that time. The compartmentalization of subjects. You had English class, and then you had, math class, and you had, spelling class, and this and that, history class, and so forth. And I just remember, like so often, looking out the window in the classroom and just, being somewhere else. And so subsequently I wasn't a good student. But ironically, at home, behind the scenes, I was a voracious reader. And I remember my dad got this set of encyclopedias. They were Encyclopedia Britannica. This is back in the primeval days of when there was a lot of book reading, which is, again, a little bit different than today. But he got this set, which is for the adults, I guess. It was these big brown books. I think it was probably like 22 of them, from A to Z, encyclopedias. And then he also got me a set of junior Encyclopedia Britannica. So, maybe it was about 20 of those volumes, but they were smaller volumes than the regular big ones. I mean, these books were like this thick and just big. So, at home, I would just pour through these encyclopedias, and I remember, I used to pour through the dictionary. In other words, I had this innate interest in learning, but if somehow it wasn't clicking or crossing over into the actual school setting or classroom setting. But I just love to read, and I learned a lot in that, with books, the mind is, we talked about the theater of the mind. You can be transported, especially when you might be in circumstances or an environment that is, 180 degrees, away from, kind of where you imagine yourself wanting to be. And reading was a way to, because again, we talked about, it's all about the mind. And, you can call it an escape, or you can call it an education, or whatever you want to frame it. But for me, maybe that was my escape, was, for some reason, this was a frustrating world over here, but, I could read all these great books, and, like I said, these different subjects. And, so fast forward later on in life, it was always kind of a quandary to me, like, why was I such, a disengaged, a bad student, like I said. And for I'm not going to go into all the details, but let's just say it was not expected in the environment that I grew up in that I would get the kind of grades that I got. It was quite a mystery and a frustration to myself, as well as obviously my parents. But years later, when I had, began to learn more about subjects that I didn't have as much familiarity with because they weren't part of my background, and I got into astrology and, different, mythology, and what I was discovering was, and I'm sure there's people that have a similar, story, is that a lot of the things that I was, discouraged from looking into or learning about, because, for whatever reason, they were dangerous, or they were bad, or they were this, or they were that. Once I began to live my life as an adult and experience and, live in different places from where I grew up, and I opened myself up, I can't tell you how much I learned. Um, again, astrology was not encouraged in the environment or the schools that I went to, and I've learned so much from it. I've learned, and this isn't to propagate it to anybody, but just be mindful of the fact that not everyone wants the wisdom or knowledge of certain areas to be disseminated to everybody. Just put it that way. But in thinking about like, why was I so displaced in a traditional setting? Years later, I had my birth chart done, whatever. And for those who haven't done it, there's a lot of information, and to keep it real, I couldn't believe in retrospect how accurate it was. And as we talked about before, the birth chart is basically at the very time that you're born, the day, the hour and minute, and the latitude and longitude of where you were born. It basically is a kind of a chart of where all these different planets were, or at the time of your birth, what house they were in. We talked about the 12 houses and which particular planets were in which houses at the time of your birth. And it's like a snapshot. Now, the whole point of the birth chart it's not necessarily like this is your future, like it's locked in, because we have free will, right? But what I came to discover once I learned about it was it was more like a map you looked at kind of in retrospect, where certain things were answered in retrospect based upon this chart, at least for me. So it's not about trying to predict the future. It's about trying to disseminate what patterns, what potential areas of weakness or strength that may lay within you, based on your chart. So anyway, at one point I'm looking at the chart, and it's like I said, it's very detailed, and it made sense. I was like, wow, okay. But then when I got to this section, there's a part where they break down what planets where, and specifically Neptune, the planet Neptune, which is the planet of kind of a dreamy illusions, all that kind of stuff. Very creative. It actually rules Pisces, which is a water sign. But anyway, Neptune is in my third house, and those who know, the third house is the house of communication. You communicating. And it said, I'm looking at it, I'm just going to read it. It said, he has a lot of imagination, high ideals, and then the next sentence, dry, cold facts are hard for him to absorb. So traditional academics might not appeal. So there in a nutshell, my chart that was, formulated from my birth, laid out, and again, this was not something that I knew about at the time. This is years later as an adult. And certainly my family would not have consulted this. But in retrospect, if somewhere in that process, in high school or junior high school, if the family had been privy to this information, looking over the trajectory of my grades and then looking at this, it's telling you there's a traditional academic setting or coursework for me was going to be trouble. For other people, might have been no problem, clearly wasn't. So I just mentioned about discernment in that description would be something that where you could discern that, oh, this thing is saying that the way these influences were positioned, it was somewhat of a predictor that said, you know, all things being equal, not that they ever are, that he was going to have you know, you're going to be at a disadvantage in a traditional setting. You may need to get him somewhere else. So I only mention that in that, you know, the theater of the mind, the power of discernment. We're all at different levels. We all have different strengths. We all have different, you know, shall we say, things that we need to work on to get better at. But we have natural gifts. All of us do. The trick is that we have to learn what those gifts are, and in many cases, the only way to learn what those gifts are is to get out of our comfort zones and to learn about things, and not just, you know, have an opinion on something from a distance, or an opinion that you've inherited from someone else. It's like Stevie Wonder said in the song Superstition. When you believe in things that you don't understand, you suffer. Superstition ain't the way. So discernment is not superstition. Discernment is using your intuition to, you know, kind of cull meaning between the lines, and you know, to better inform yourself in making decisions for yourself, and others. And I just brought that up because there are some people out there that were, you know, probably unbelievable students, and then there were others of us who struggled in that setting, and then maybe found our way subsequent to that by going to a more holistic approach, you know, kind of coming at it from different angles, you know, unorthodox. You know, we're all different, so the trick is to find your lane. You know, it's not going to be the same for everybody, but we all have a lane, we all have gifts, but we're not all awake to those realities. And that's all we're doing. We're just waking up. Once again, thank you. Peace.